Interpreters often have to do their jobs in private closed-door meetings. This is called bilateral interpreting. Actually, things began before anyone even arrived. Most of the times, terms are agreed upon in advance of the meeting. The agendas are carefully negotiated and outlined. All we need is a plausible topic to get started. Well, for meeting in front of press, they don't want to be the center of attention or appear in press photos. They are in sidelines, so they can easily be cropped out of the pictures. But in closed-door bilateral meetings, interpreter will be in the left or right side of the speaker. Let's move to types of interpretation. There are two types of interpretation: simultaneous and consecutive. Consecutive is the most common style of interpreting in diplomatic situations. The interpreter waits until the speaker pauses time. But what happens if the speaker goes on and on without pausing? Interpreter rarely translate word for word. Instead, we remember specific ideas and translate those ideas accordingly. But when the speaker goes on and on for a long time, interpreter rely on note-taking. Interpreter use the symbol. These symbols represent the speaker's ideas, but each interpreter has their own style. Interpreter usually come up with the symbols beforehand. Now, let's switch to simultaneous interpretation. Simultaneous interpretation is usually used with earpieces and microphones and with interpreters working from a soundproof booth. Usually, this situation can happen in big conferences like United Nations, but in closed-door bilateral meeting, we sit beside the speaker. When we are right next to another person, we can employ what we call social, which means whispering in French. This usually is an ideal. Whispering for a long time is bad for the vocal cord. It can also be hard to hear the ambient noise in the room like ventilation. Let's talk about pacing. In simultaneous interpretation, you try to maintain an optimal distance from the original speaker. So, when one diplomat starts speaking, the person employing social would probably start. Interpreter still has to figure out the optimal edge. Here's the problem. The further back in the diplomat speech, the interpreter has to keep in their short-term memory. They're listening and processing as they're interpreting, but get too close to the original speaker's word and they may screw up things like grammar, syntax, and style. Of course, interpreters are prone to fatigue and burnout. Fatigue will hit at around 30 minutes or less. If pushed to hour limits, interpreter can rarely suffer. What happens if the conversation turns emotional or the speaker becomes rude? Interpreters are not meant to be mediators. Their only job is to stay true to the message of the speaker. If someone becomes rude or angry, if threats are made, then we are supposed to interpret those threats faithfully. Although a speaker may become emotional, just stipulate. The interpreter is not going to parrot the behavior of the speaker. This is not the way. So the situation has gotten quite intense. Maybe a joke would be helpful to lighten the mood, but jokes are some of the difficult things to interpret because they can get lost in translation easily. Attempts at humor are often too lost, and there's not much an interpreter who, when faced with an untranslatable joke, simply say that the speaker has shared a joke. It is untranslatable. Please laugh now. This job is tough juggle the many things that we have to do to able interpret well and accurately. But this job is important, but because it's what makes communication possible between countries and between people.